Wow, it has been a while, but hi everybody, I'm Damon, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about a post that I'm doing on the blog, and I figure it would be much easier to propagate the information moving forward by doing a video here, posting it additionally on the blog, but also getting additional reach through YouTube, because these are one of the few things that I'm very, very deeply rooted in that is outside of the realm of physical fitness or nutrition, but I feel like is incredibly important for personal self-development and improvement, whichever one you prefer. I know a lot of people don't like self-improvement because it's been plagued by like Gary Vee, but people like self-development because it's practically the same thing and you're constantly refining yourself, which I find to be absolutely phenomenal. And the reason we're starting with meditations is because it's exactly what I remember when I was first starting out back in 2018, going through the whole cycle of intense physical fitness, deep diving even harder into nutrition, what I can take in the gym to become a lot stronger, a lot quicker, recover much better, moving forward and propagating a lot of my internal monologue to make sure that I am in line with my values and constantly pushing to be slightly incrementally better each day. And although a lot of people will push for books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Atomic Habits, and Habits of Highly Effective People, I think that meditations, the sort of Chris Voss's finding a way to work on internal monologue and then interpersonal communication skills is great. The book from Chris Voss, by the way, it's called Never Split the Difference. He's a hostage negotiating trainer for the FBI or whatever, and he just largely gives you a good framework mentally for entering in conversation, which may be unpleasant, but it's one of those things where conflict must arise when it is necessary and small, as opposed to pushing it off and waiting for it to explode. That's just something that's very unpleasant and more often than not detrimental later down the line. But anyway, before we get into any of those tangents, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So what is it about? How do I interpret it? And how do I use it in my day-to-day life? So there's a few different versions. If you are somebody who does not have the desire to get a physical hardback book and you want to have something to listen to in the car, this is the version that I would always go back through. I literally have gone through this like 8 or 9 different times. So it's by Vox Stoica. There will be a link to this in the blog post as well as in the comment section pinned. And essentially what happens is he goes through the entire thing and he reads with a very pleasant voice. It is absolutely remarkable how well he's done it. If you prefer to read on a screen and you don't want to pay for money, MIT does have a version which is available in the original translation from Greek to English, and it hasn't been revised or re-scrubbed through, so some of the words are wrong, but luckily the core tenets of every single book as well as Marcus Aurelius' thoughts are practically the same. It's just a little bit of nuance with how people decipher words, or some people have refined it to make it more SEO or more marketable or more reader friendly. Some of the words like the daemons and everything might be a little bit too bulbous for some people, I'd imagine, so they've kind of found a way to find a happy medium between what is easily broachable for a person versus that. And then of course you can go onto Amazon and get them as well. I'm going to be putting in links to the blog so that people can support me. You can get like a paperback. If you're somebody who wants to put this on your shelf and display it, there's a hardback copy. It is quite expensive, so I would highly recommend against that unless you find this to be one of the most pivotal pieces in your self-development journey, in which case it's something to proudly display, in which case you can go for that. But anyway, let's backtrack a bit. So Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Who was Marcus Aurelius and why is his book so important? Why is it being propagated by a lot of people? So Marcus Aurelius is not a writer. I guess in a sense he actually is a philosopher, but that's not really what he's known for. He's not known for being philosophical and purporting a lot of the ideas and sentiments largely out to the public, much like someone like Cicero would be, Socrates, Plato, etc. He was one of the last great kings and emperor during the time of peace and vigilance in Rome. And as Marcus Aurelius had ruled, he'd essentially become the world's most powerful man. And the books are essentially just his private journals full of his thoughts, full of how he felt and how he operated in his day-to-day life for the most part. He references a lot of the people in the times, how he's reflected on them, and you can see a small shift in his internal monologue and the narrative that he pushes forward as he goes through more stressors, more factors, and ultimately more chaos, and really the eruption of what is going to be Rome's inevitable downfall somewhat down the line. But you can see that although he has a shift in the prerogatives that he has, largely he just keeps the same sort of stoic philosophy. And this is ultimately why people revert back to him and a few other people for stoicism. It's because he's very consistent in his application, and it's great for regrounding. So if there's one thing I can put forward, it's that this is a mindset that will help keep you proactive, not reactive. Above and beyond that, this is something that will absolutely help you become more rigid in the sense that you will be able to clearly delineate between an appropriate and an inappropriate reaction based on the nature of your being. So if you're someone who's too highly emotional, having this framework will absolutely help you keep away from being highly reactive to situations, blowing off steam when you shouldn't be, and erupting on people when you should be much more calm and docile. And consequently, if you are too rigid, too stoic, and you are too hard stuck in your places, there are certain chapters which are going to resonate with you to be more of a comrade, more of a brotherly, loving, and cherishing person in general. And I don't mean brotherly like this book is only for men. This is something that is universally beneficial for everybody. He talks about specifically, what does your personal nature demand of you? How can you interact pleasantly? And how can you do what you know is in line with your values consistently? There's some parts of this book that I quoted very early on in my Instagram, and they just kind of always stick with me. Like the part about him getting up in the bed in the morning, was I meant for this? Was I meant to just stay huddled under the covers? There's other parts where it's like everything is transient. It is only present in this moment. And after I've acknowledged this, it's already gone. Why set worry for things that are out of my hands? Why worry about the future? Why worry about the past? Why worry about eternal fame and glory? For the people that will remember you, who remember them remembering you, will soon all perish. So it's kind of futile to try to ascend to some high level of mysticism, or I guess eternal glory and fame. Those are largely only for people with mythological lore, or people who have done something quite great like him. And it's a very good recentering tool for reimagining yourself being your center and moving forward. And this really helps propagate that humble yet driven ego, which I found to be unbelievably important for my journey starting out. The use of practically everything that I could get my hands on to become slightly more incrementally better, driving myself out of a place that was largely based on insecurity, and being more personable and being more outgoing is largely predicated on this. It's largely predicated on the obviously the pro hormones back then, the kind you would get from like GNC, like the 1-testo, the estrogen-X and everything. Those did help very well with building out the musculature to then become more confident. But I mean, even that, it consequently, once you get to the size you thought was unachievable or much quicker, you want to keep going, you want to keep chasing it. So you're still very self-defeating in that regard, and that's still going to give you bounds and bounds of insecurities. So you have to address those core tenets first. And this may just be what a lot of people need to help address internal traumas and internal issues, and to help propagate the best solution moving forward. Sorry about that. I had to cough. I am slowly getting over this. I don't know if it's allergies. I went back home and there's a lot of ragweed and hay fever. I'm unfortunately one of the people that does have that sort of aversion to it. So anyway, getting back to the main part of the video, I think that largely it'll be very good behaviors for somebody who wants to address something where they feel that there is an insufficiency. And to be quite honest, it's very, very hard to take a good look at yourself and to legitimately say, hey, I do have an insufficiency in this domain. And even with the ability to just read this book or sit in there and have it in your headphones, I feel like it's great. you don't have to always tell people and always have this external accountability. And I think that largely for something like this, it is something where you can consume the information first. You can see that there is an apparent change in the way that you operate. And when other people sort of notice that very, very small incremental change over time, you do essentially ascend to a difference in your vernacular, your thoughts, the way that you wish to carry yourself. And moving forward, I feel like you become a more well-rounded individual. This doesn't make you a completely different person in the sense that, one day you're sitting out partying, drinking booze, and the next you're in a toga, you're sitting down and you're asking your friends what the value is inherently in the world. It's not anything life-changing like that, but you do notice that you become much more intentional, not only with your thoughts, not only with your actions, but your interactions and how you enter into them. And even if it's just more latent, or you have this sort of tacit integration of some of these thoughts into your day-to-day life, it really does give you a very good sense of the world. Like, I used to be very, very disgusted by very egregious acts of PDA, and I remember clear as day when I was just walking back from one of my classes that I looked at it and I went, okay. And usually I'd be like, ew, why are these two crackheads making out on a public bench? That's pretty gross. But there's a line in there. I think it may be book 4 or book 5. I'm not really sure on which one it is, but it just stuck with me clear as day that, when there's indecency in the world, or if there are unkind people, consequently that means that there must be kind people or decent people. They are giving the world the balance that it requires. So why should I feel any disdain or any discomfort with them? And I think I just sort of glossed over that part, but I just remember thinking, I'm not really adverse to this as much as I was. It's still gross, but I don't feel like a visceral reaction to it. I just kind of feel like it's the way the world is. And it was largely just that portion of that book where I don't even remember fully going over it, but I can just hear Vox, that voice saying that in the back of my head. And that was a new frame of operating, and I've just literally moved forward with that. And I've just become more accepting of disappointing people, or people who I feel like are on the opposite end of what will be a progressive and good moving forward sort of perspective and alignment in the world. But again, you need to have that distribution, and like a lot of other books that I'm going to be referencing in the future say, it's that there isn't an evenness to it. There's a Pareto distribution of 80-20, where maybe 80% of the people are very orderly and good and virtuous, and 20% aren't. But the scale of those 20% being an aggregate of crabs in a bucket, or maybe it's the inverse. There's a lot of crabs in the bucket pulling other people down, creating nebularity, creating confusion, creating disorder and chaos. Maybe that's the case. But I want to wrap this up really quickly. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It is largely seen as one of the best Stoic philosophy books. I don't think you inherently need to have a good grasp of Stoicism or even an interest in that in and of itself. I think that this is going to be one of the most beneficial things that you can do in terms of self-development, and finding a good way to handle internal emotions, internal trauma, and to give you a new perspective on life that is going to make it much more tolerable and bearable, and helping you push forward past any insecurities, past any sort of difficulties that you may find. And with all the chapters, all of the books, this is coming from one of the world's greatest men. I'm sure that some of the trials and tribulations that he had are quite worse than what you're dealing with currently, or even will ever see. So it is very reaffirming that even in that time of great duress, he can still focus on small trivial things, but he doesn't let him affect them. And moving forward, you can just sort of imagine the depth and the scale of what he's had to endure. And some of the things he sounds like it's a bit nonsensical to think about, like not eating spiced foods, or to be happy with things that are unseasoned and unpleasant. And when he talks about things like, what is purple other than some crushed beetles? What is an emerald? Is it less beautiful because it hasn't been called beautiful by man? It really does give you a great sort of depth and appreciation for understanding value, understanding and recognizing the sort of liminal territory that we operate in this world. So I would highly recommend it. It has been one of the most formative pieces in my life, and I hope that you guys are able to extract some kind of value from it. if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, I would highly appreciate it if you leave them on the blog post that is accompanying this. Again, I'm going to have a link to this as well as some Amazon affiliate links in the comment section below, as well as a link to mindlessneasy.com. I mean, fiddle around there. There's some more articles coming out on that. There's also some that I haven't published to YouTube yet, but I really want to propagate a lot of traffic towards there. If you don't have the time or the patience to go to Mindless and Easy, you're more than welcome to leave a comment on the YouTube video, but I'm sort of going to throttle back my direct engagement on YouTube just for a little bit, just until I get these posts going, and then hopefully I can give you a little bit more insight on how I've used it and how you may find benefit in it. But again, I hope that you guys have had a great start to your spring. And again, any comments, questions, or concerns, you guys know where to leave them. If you don't want to go on YouTube, my Instagram handle is @DamonIsVegan, so I wanted to say, hey, saw your video on the book meditations. I had a couple questions for you. What did you learn from this, or blah, 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 blah. How do you interpret that? That's more than fine. We can talk philosophy all day. I really do enjoy it, but I want to leave you guys with that. So until next time, Toodles.